20 years ago this weekend, Resident Evil 4 hit the disc trays of unexpected GameCube owners and instantly began forging a lasting legacy for itself. As PC Gamer's senior editor Rich Stanton once wrote, "There are great games and there are classics. Games so forward-thinking and complete they shape entire corners of our industry." Well, Resident Evil 4 is certainly the latter, sitting 20th in Metacritic's highest reviewed games of all time, besides Half-Life 2 and Baldur's Gate 3. Originally released in January 2005, Capcom's legendary survival horror had a troubled development, but it's since gone on to become not just a favourite of Resi fans, but of horror game sickos as well. After 20 years and over 13 million units sold, what makes it a bona fide classic? And why do we remember it over Resident Evils 5, 6 and 7? Games that could have, in theory, improved on its approach, but for the most part, definitely didn't. And why are the residents in this village so evil? And how did something as seemingly mundane as a new camera behaviour revolutionise third-person action adventures forever? What's good, gamers? I'm Midas. Get your bingo cards at the ready.
Where's everyone going? Bingo?
Rev up that unforgettable controller as we discover what is it about Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4 sees the return of fan favourite Leon Kennedy as our protagonist. He's back, this time as a counter-terrorist agent charged with rescuing the president's daughter, Ashley Graham, who has been kidnapped by a religious cult in Capcom's fictional version of Spain. Let's just call it Spain. At least that's the game we're familiar with, but that's not how Resident Evil 4 started life. Production originally began in 1999 under the supervision of Hideki Kamiya. What he and his team produced was a radical departure for the series. So radical, in fact, that the series creator Shinji Mikami stepped in. Previous Resident Evil games relied on fixed camera angles, sometimes in the corner of a room or at one end of a corridor. Backgrounds were pre-rendered stills, with a few clever tricks to give a false impression of depth. Mikami's game used fully 3D environments, with the camera floating through the space to keep the players framed perfectly at all times. It also starred a new protagonist, Tony Redgrave, a silver-haired fox that we'll all grow to love. But we'll talk more about that later. Mikami felt the new game's flashy cameras and new leads strayed too far from the survival horror roots that had successfully defined Biohazard, Resident Evil's name in Japan. Instead, Kamiya's game was redesigned as a standalone project, Devil May Cry, and the new character would be known as Dante. That's right, DMC would originally be conceived as a Resident Evil game. Now that I mention it, Leon and Dante do kind of have the same haircut. Dante out here stealing Leon's style.
I'll take that.
Mikami stepped in to restart production on Resident Evil 4. This time he moved the camera to sit over Leon's right shoulder, putting us right there in the action. Looking at it today, it's not just a good camera. Resident Evil's camera system is woven inextricably into the design of other aspects of the game, reacting to almost every action you take. The amount of information the game allows you to take in fluctuates based on what you're doing. When standing, the camera is positioned close to Leon's right shoulder, partially obstructing your view by default and adding some baseline tension. As you run forward, the field of view widens slightly, making you more aware of the threats around you. Aiming reduces the FOV, visualizing Leon's focus, and shifts the camera to the right. This position makes room for the laser sight to be seen at an angle, an essential attachment for many of the game's shotguns and pistols. If aiming was done straight down the barrel or 180 degrees behind Leon, the laser sight wouldn't behave in the same way on the screen, jumping between limbs or thrown axes as targets change depth and lurch forward at Leon. The asymmetry also means that Leon has a huge blind spot. When you punch to aim, you lose a huge portion of your peripheral vision, making each decision to draw your weapon a deliberate one. The way the camera moves is closely tied to the character movement. Whilst RE4 was a departure from the deliberately heavy movement style seen in previous titles, it's not a completely clean break. There's still some tank-like movement to the controls. Leon's turns are limited while moving forward, and he cannot run whilst aiming. These limitations of movement and visual disempower the player, especially when moving through doors or turning your back on enemies. The result is slower, but not sluggish. Technical style of shooting character that asks you to be deliberate in every shot and knife swipe. A game that punishes button bashing or panicking. In fighting game terms, it's more a virtual fighter than a street fighter. You could argue that this style of combat shares some DNA with Dark Souls. In an interview looking back at 25 years of Resident Evil, former series director Shinji Mikami revealed that the camera angle just felt natural and they didn't plan on making anything innovative, and they simply thought the angle was just better. But remember, this was still in an era when lock-on control schemes were common in third-person shooters. Personally, I think the modular damage is one of the key components here. The fidelity of each individual shot. RE4's enemies are top-tier stuntmen, staggering and spinning when hit, reacting with big sweeping animations that send clear feedback. Resident Evil 4 stepped away from the zombie formula that we know from the series, reduced the clunky tank controls, and took the series into a more action-focused direction. Seeing Leon suplex like he's a guest character in WWE.
There's no release here. This is flat out.
But what really makes Resident Evil 4 special is the locale. Stepping away from the confines of Raccoon City and relocating to a village in rural Spain, populated by bizarre villagers who not only seem weird and uneasy, but force the player to question if they are indeed human. Unlike past Resident Evil games, crowd control is paramount. There is no limbering zombies here. Instead, you're faced with a variety of different hostiles, putting the player under constant pressure. Prioritizing your targets is key to survival, and you're given a wide array of options of how to handle them. Whether that be shooting a nearby exploding barrel, or a convenient TNT stick they're holding, or focusing on those horrid flying bugs. This adds a layer of strategy not seen in previous entries of the series. For the first time, Resident Evil felt like a big Hollywood movie, going global, introducing big villains and bigger set pieces. From Leon roundhouse kicking enemies like he's Jean-Claude Van Damme, shooting down enemies while rushing down a minecart, to be chased by chainsaw wielding man, Resident Evil 4 shifted the series focus into a more action-oriented gameplay, resulting in less tense horror but a more heart-pounding game. It's more fun than freaky, more satisfying than spine-tingling, and this was only rectified with the launch of 2017's Resident Evil 7 Biohazard's petrifying first-person nightmare. Add Resident Evil 2 mystery spy Ada Wong back into the mix. I do love me some Ada Wong, who would later get her own Separate Ways DLC. Valdilobos, and some would say suave native Luis Serra, and the insanity that is Ramon Salsa, the Umbrella Company's obsession with viruses, Leon's awesome arsenal of guns, and probably the best merchant in a Resident Evil game.
Welcome. Ooh, what you buying?
And you've got a potent mix. Its DLC and its subsequent remake have a plethora of Resi greats that beckon you through the twists and turns of another Umbrella Corporation minefield. Resident Evil 4 had a huge impact when released. Its innovative use of third-person over-the-shoulder camera didn't just revitalize the Resident Evil series, it would go on to inspire most third-person action adventures since. You can feel the same frenetic energy in Gears of War, with the developers at Microsoft citing Resi 4's camera being a direct inspiration, and the same claustrophobia in Dead Space and the combat sections of Uncharted and The Last of Us. Initially launching on one of these, the GameCube, it would go on to be ported on the PlayStation 2, 3 and 4, Nintendo Wii, smartphones, Mac. At this rate, you probably can play it on the microwave, but the less said about the PC port, the better. Resident Evil 4 holds up an almost legendary status against PC gamers for how broken the 2007 PC version was. Only patches and a full remake published in 2023 partially atone for these sins. Resi 4 is going on to break record after record, achieving over 7 million sales worldwide. And if you've never played the OG version of Resident Evil 4, the Chainsaw demo is available on Steam. But what are your favorite Resident Evil 4 memories? I'm Midas, let us know in the comments below, and subscribe to PC Gamer for more look backs at genre-defining classics like this.